Hello, ladies and gentlemen of YouTube, and welcome to another episode of Fanalysis, Avatar: The Last Airbender. I am Retty4, this is GreyJournal91,
Hey guys.
and this is Antoine Bandelay.
Be water, my friends.
Take us into the summary of this episode, Matt.
Sure. So today we're talking about Book 1, Episode 15, Bato of the Water Tribe. And in this episode, Sokka and Katara meet up with an old Water Tribe elder of theirs that they knew when they were a little bit younger, who went off to war and they haven't seen since, and who's the best friend of their father. Aang feels left out throughout this episode, and meanwhile Zuko and Iroh are on Aang's trail after they meet a bounty hunter with a unique way of tracking targets across the world. So that's basically the setup of this episode. Taking us away, Antoine.
The setup for the whole thing is them finding the whale tooth sword thing, which makes Sokka use his investigation skills so we can get to see like him as the hunter, like actually coming to fruition and tracking like, oh, this is how like the battle went, because I think he saw the arrows were on fire or they were singed. So he's like, okay, so the water tribe probably faced the firebenders, and then they go down to the beach and find one of their father's fleet ships, but then they realize not that their father's ship but just another ship, and I think that's when they happen onto Bato.
Not immediately, no.
It's sort of
later
decide
on.
to make they make camp there, and he comes back and finds them later. Yeah.
Yeah. I like the fact that, again, this is all, as we've said before many times now, it's highlighting Sokka's investigation skills, his intelligence, which is kind of important for this episode as a whole. It's a quasi Sokka episode, not a full on character episode for any of them really, but he probably has the strongest driving theme attached to him, with the whole wisdom.
I would
that we'll
say
talk about later.
I would say probably equal parts with Aang at the end of the day, but it's just in a very different flavor from Aang, because it's more about Aang's character choices, as we'll see going on. Whereas this is more an episode that it's sort of structured around Sokka's. I guess you could say he's the more proactive member of the group, but it's equally about Aang and his personality.
The structure of the presentation is more focusing on Sokka's mini episode arc, I guess, but with Aang it's the main meat of the plot and why things are happening and how they're happening and such. So equal parts is probably right for that. But yeah, I like this is the first time we've seen the ships that they use to go out into the fleet and join the war for the Water Tribe members. I like how distinct it is and how it kind of fits the culture that is being presented in the episode. The little trappings that they talk about later on, and the design of the ship, and how it gels with everything we know about the tribe so far. This is kind of a nice window into what we get to see later on, both in Korra and later on in this series itself.
Yeah, and also kind of keeping that back to or taking it from the back of our minds back to the forefront. I would tend to forget that Sokka and Katara even have parents. You know, a lot of shows like this, kids are just doing their thing. Like, they're not really so much searching to regain that family connection. They're just sort of off on adventures. Like that adds that element of realism where they are hoping to find their father as they're going along on their journey, even though that's not their quest.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I like the fact that it does take the time to focus on this sort of thing, and that's one of the stronger points of this episode is the ties that they have to their culture, and Bato, who's kind of their window again into that culture and their point of memory. We'll get some scenes that we'll talk about later coming up, but before that we jump over to Iroh and Zuko. A brief moment of quiet in Zuko's little meditation chamber, which does have the two swords of the Blue Spirit on the wall. I noticed. I looked for the mask, which wasn't there, but the swords are present, at least at this point. And they have Jennifer Hale turn up on her, was it Shershu? I think it was Shershu, the creature, jumping onto the ship and basically introducing the tracking element of the episode, which will be the focus of the Zuko kind of story moving forward. For this episode, obviously. What did you guys think of June, who is the character's actual name?
I mean, yeah, she's cool. Like, I don't know if I ever like took anything away from her like at the end of the episode or first time watching through Avatar. Like, she never really stuck out to me, and I think I always actually, every time I rewatch Avatar, I always forget that she actually exists until like the episode comes up, and I'm like,
okay.
oh right.
Yeah.
To be fair, she shows up maybe twice in the whole series, so that's forgivable.
That's the reason I ask, because I have the same thing. I don't think that she's much of anything in this. She's just Jennifer Hale bringing her usual average performance. Not that makes it okay. The average
The
performance
average
of Jennifer
performance
Hale
for her is
yeah,
very good.
yeah,
is what you meant.
but yeah, it's
Yeah.
that made us that came off terribly.
very good
Great voice
clarification.
actress, but this
Yeah.
isn't the role she's known for, is what I'm saying.
She is the quintessential shepherd. Like there is no
Yeah.
other shepherd
Oh
but
yeah,
Jennifer Hale.
100%, definitely.
And she's also, Basta the Shan and all these other characters. Like she's really cool. Yeah.
Sarah Palmer, yeah, not her.
And
best
Satil Shan, for the record. But anyway, but yeah, she's here. She's the badass of this episode. Like she's one of those characters like who just sort of skates through life and is a little too cool for school, a little too cool to be believed.
Iroh's reaction to her is a recurring thing throughout this episode, and it's a strange.
This is the sketchiest that Iroh ever gets. Like he's a little creepy in this one.
A little bit lecherous.
Lecherous is a good word for it. Like if you just saw this episode and you watch this, I think if you're paying attention to his character, you go, "Oh, he's that dirty old man." Like that, he's that character. Whereas, like, it's the only time he's like that. Yeah. But it's just funny to me.
I guess that's. I mean, it does kind of fit. I mean, not that it doesn't fit with anything else, but like we never really see him interact with women ever. So that could be one of his things. We just don't ever see it often. You know what I mean?
I mean, I guess. It's strange given what we know about his character as a whole, though. But I guess it doesn't necessarily conflict. But that's the introduction of that kind of plot device, I guess, which will come back in a bit when they engage with that, or Zuko engages with that. But then we get back to the camp with them resting and Sokka sitting there in contemplation and looking back on the memories. Because we didn't mention it before, actually. There's a very, very, very brief flashback just as he finds the tooth, the whale tooth. Sword.
That was actually weird to me at first because it felt like 'cause usually Avatar doesn't do that kind of stuff, like the cheap flashback about this is how I know this item, but then it recurs, so then it's okay. But that first scene was always kind of like, what is this? Why is this really cheesy flashback happening right now?
Yeah, it stands out. Most scenes like this for Avatar would have just been a quiet moment of reflection, on his face. You kind of see the emotions playing out, but here they do actually show the flashback. I liked the fact that it was very short because it speaks to Sokka's, in the moment personality. He's thinking, okay, stop thinking about that. Focus on what you're doing. And he moves on and he carries on with the investigation. And then later, only when he's got this time to breathe and this, this moment of reflection in the camp, does he then truly kind of dive into the flashback as a whole, looking at the fleet and its departure and how that affected him, which I think is definitely something we needed to see because it's a moment that has been kind of glossed over thus far. In the series.
I think it's also like a man thing, like not even just a young man thing, like a man thing, like to be more sort of thinking about like your vulnerabilities and the things you're sad about, like when you're on your own and not presenting that like when there's other people around, even if it's like your sibling and your friend. But also, is this the first time we see their dad?
It is, yes.
Yes.
I mean, I know that he's been mentioned, like that they have one, they have a father, but I think it's the first time. It is the first time we saw him though, and like heard him talk, like in via flashback, yes, but so that needed to be established because he does eventually become a character in the show.
And you mentioned about the man thing. I like the fact that the thing that is focused on with this flashback for him is that he talks to Sokka and gives him this, a man needs to know where he's most needed. That's kind of the that's his lesson to Sokka in that moment. And I like that was heavily present in the not so much Sokka's but certainly Katara's reaction to him later on in the series that we'll discuss way when we get to it.
That's true.
But
that's a season 3 thing, right? Yeah.
But there's a point of contention there that could arguably be jumped off from this point itself. You should have known where you needed to be, kind of thing. I really like that how that plays back. Looking, obviously you didn't know that at the time, but looking back on it in retrospectively, it's a nice little touch.
I also like the idea that the soldiers go out for years at a time because that's like legit, even in modern warfare too. Like if you have a family member who goes out to war, they'll be gone for a very, very long time. It's not just like we're just gonna go to one battle and then we'll be back in a week or whatever. It's no, usually if it's warfare, you're gonna be gone for years at a time. So I like that there is that indication within the show, but also that it shows this distance, between Sokka and his father.
Yeah, it's about 2 years I think they mentioned in the episode itself. And I like as well that you said about that distance. I like not just the distance in time, but I like that they highlighted through Bato the level of
that they're
disconnect.
Eastern Earth Kingdom, which I actually wonder too. What is it? What are they trying? Are they recruiting the Earth Kingdom to help them against the Firebenders?
Presumably, they're just fighting on the front line with them. I mean, they don't really need.
That's what they seem to be doing. Yeah, they clearly they clearly have had many run-ins with the Fire Nation. That's why Bato's here. He got injured in a battle.
Mm-hmm.
But the not so much the physical distance either. There's a distance in time, distance in on the map.
It's kind of
But,
weird. It's kind of weird to think that they never made their way to the northern tribe to be like, hey, let's group up and
Yeah,
like.
I did
that's
think
true.
about that. It's
Yeah.
a bit of a weird thing, but I suppose that would be the obvious move. So maybe they were just avoiding it tactically. I don't know. There's a lot of the ways you can go.
Right
around
now,
in
I'm
your
only
head,
thinking of book 2 core right now because there's a very specific conflict between the North and the South.
Right.
Is that also present? I don't remember it being present.
I
I
don't.
don't think
We do
so.
know they're very isolationist because they pride themselves on the fact that we're impenetrable. We can't be. You know, I don't get the impression they would be willing to send droves of warriors out to help fight the war that they're isolated from.
Oh, the
not
northern
intended.
tribe, sure, but I mean, if the question is, do they not get along well with the southern tribe? I don't think that that's established in this
Right.
series.
No, don't think so. Outside of the cultural differences, anyway. Yeah, but I don't know how it would play out on that level. But sorry, the original point I was trying to make with again, that's another element to it. But was that the disconnect that they're going to have with the father looming overhead? Because Bato, like, oh, I forgot you were too young for then, you know, and oh, I forgot this about you and that. There's a slight kind of during the reminiscing, there's a disconnect between what he thinks soccer is based on what he actually is, and I like that gives that looming cloud for when they eventually meet their father again, because it has been 2 years. You know, that's especially not that much bigger deal when they're older, but when they're in their teen years.
So when you're a kid, yeah. I mean, he was like
Yeah.
Aang's age, more or less, when he said goodbye.
Yeah.
So yeah.
And how that affects soccer, but also how the fact that he's going to have changed so much in those years. You know, the time, the experiential level is huge. And his dad's going to maybe not realize that. You know, this is what that episode sold for me: the idea that, oh God, when they meet each other, they're going to be slightly, well, strangers. There was that kind of thing for me.
Yeah. And again, you know, it might even be pushing 3 years because we're getting close to the end of book 1, and book 2 marks
Right.
3 years since Zuko and said goodbye to his father under
Yeah.
very different circumstances. But yeah, so where are we at now? Like, is this when
Aang
Bato
feeling
actually
left out
arrives?
because this is when they're Bato, and then like they're talking to him and like, you know, being like, oh hey, yeah, he's our cool buddy, like our dad's friend or whatever. He was like the cool guy. And Aang feels left out, and I feel like talking about people's foils like Iroh with his thing with the June, and then like with Aang, I feel like he's kind of a needy person. Like I feel
Yeah.
like that's like one of his things, is that he's just a little bit too needy. Like he needs attention, or he needs people to recognize him, or you know, to give him
Yeah.
compassion. And I mean, that's one of the reasons why he kind of, I mean, that's not the main reason why he left. He left because he felt too much pressure, but it's because he felt attached to Gyatso, and I just feel like that's showing up again as one of his faults, one of his character wounds, is that he just is too clingy.
He is kind of terrified of being alone. You know, the thought of losing Sokka and Katara for whatever reason is terrifying to him.
To be fair, like the episode sort of unsubtly introduces that as well, because they do kind of straight up ignore him. I don't think they even say, hey, this is Bato, our dad's friend. Like, he's just sort of like, hey, I'm Aang, I'm the Avatar, nice to meet you. And they're like, yeah, Aang, we're talking. They're kind of just ignoring him, like talking over him.
And then later too, they say, like, even though it didn't make sense to me when they said, we didn't even notice you left, Aang, even though they specifically started talking about him when he left. You know what I mean? Like, they're
Yeah,
like, that wasn't consistent.
I have some problems with the execution of this idea in the episode. I think we'll get to more specifically later. But the way it framed this kind of drama and this tension between them felt very generic and average compared to what Avatar usually brings to the table, in my opinion. A lot of the points they were making, like, you know, the scenes that they're presenting in the way that they are doing so are very, oh, I've seen this before, I've seen this a million times, this isn't anything new, this is you're saying this and that this situation is happening so that this can happen and so that we can get to this conclusion. You know, I didn't enjoy that part of the episode for that reason. One thing I do like, though, and the reason I brought this up now, is because Bato is not a part of that. I enjoy the fact that Bato isn't the one contributing to that. He's, you know, he's saying, you know, come on, he ushers Aang along as they're focusing on walking forward. You know, he is paying attention to this because
he's being inclusive. Yeah, he's being inclusive, and he's a likable person. I like that he's adult and mature, but he has like a nice character because he plays well with Sokka's horrible humor because he's so perfectly dry. He's the perfect straight man for that.
You inherited
which I
your
guess
wit
is
from
like
your father.
yeah,
With a
which
return of
comes
the
up
cough
as
moment.
he's yeah, and that shows itself as he's introducing them to like the village that he's staying in, which is sort of setting up plot details that come back later. The fact that the sisters at the abbey craft perfumes, which become relevant to the plot later on.
Yeah.
But
It's a nice setup along that intro as well. We didn't mention the Abbey so much, but it's interesting, another little tidbit of the culture. It's the first time we've seen a new kind of well, the first time we've seen it. It's another new example of a kind of settlement in the world. It's not just it's another village, it's another village, it's a bigger village. This is now it's a different kind of mini culture within the land.
Mm-hmm. Now, is this the point where like we establish Zuko sort of recruiting
yes
the bounty huntress, or
going to the wretched hive of scum and villainy and not being cautious?
Which, to be fair, I guess he didn't really have to be. But yeah, so he, in typical Zuko fashion, he demands that she help him, and she's in the middle of hopping on her shrew or whatever it's called and leaving. But then Iroh's the more diplomatic about it, and offers her a bunch gold.
Yeah, make it your weight in gold, and you've got a deal. I like how we just
like,
find that so funny. It's like
that's
okay.
That's my favorite. That's my favorite thing she says. Like that's her character right there.
It's brilliant. It's funny. Yeah, she's one of those characters that they could have done more with. They just didn't. So therefore, any impact that she might have had was kind of lost. She's very one note. Just like you said, the badass of the.
Did anyone else notice that they do look like Ryu? That she was arm wrestling, Street Fighter.
I'm not a Street Fighter fan, so no.
I didn't notice that. What happened?
Have we had this conversation before?
Don't
think so.
Don't think so.
About.
I think this might be. Is it a glitch in the Matrix right now?
I think it might be a first. I think this might be a first. Of all the things we've discussed, I don't think it's ever been Street Fighter for us. Maybe Evan or Connor.
I will say I didn't have that impression when I watched it, but now I'm thinking about it, I can picture that. He did. He definitely did.
It's an interesting den of characters as well. I mean, we always go on about how the background characters are well designed, but in that particular instance, there was a lot of like individual characters that you could almost go and want to see again as actual people, not just background kind of padding. They put so much effort into making each design of the unique kind of subcultures and scenes.
Yeah,
so good.
Particularly they do that particularly well when it's like seedier locations like this, or like the pirate ship, where like
they can get away with the lack of
like a more eclectic bunch of ne'er-do-wells.
Yeah, they can get more creative because they don't have to have any logical consistency within like this is an average citizen, this is a peasant, this is someone who has a uniform. It's just this person can do whatever the hell they want because they're crazy. They go crazy with that, rightly so. But then we go back to with Zuko having hired Jennifer Hale. They then go back to Bato, and this is where we get the actual kind of introduction of the tension of the episode with the tempting offer of I can take you to see your father, which I think is a wonderful. While I have problems with the execution of this idea and how it plays out for the characters involved, the actual idea itself I love. Like this is an excellent temptation for the siblings. And an honest human one that they can easily go, but we really want to do this, but the thing I don't like is that it's the classic, but Aang didn't hear the last part.
Right, as he left, yeah.
See, I don't, that like cliche though that may be, I don't mind that so much, but because this is kind of, whenever you have like a group of people, like friends, and they're off on like an impossible mission, there's always that part where it looks like we're gonna split, or we're gonna go separate ways, or we're like, we give up, or I'm going home, or I fuck you, I'm mad at you now, I don't like you, you're not my friend anymore. There's always that scene, and I think this is one of the only times that happens in this show. So it's not unwelcome to me, cliche though it might be. I do like that I can put myself in Aang's shoes. There were a couple of times as a kid where I like visited a friend's house and felt out of place. Like it just seemed like this house, like they do things weird here, where I feel a little out of place. But that plays into like the jealous aspect, or like whatever you want to call it. I don't know. Maybe that's not the right word. Maybe not jealousy.
Yeah, I was trying to think when I was writing the notes. Actually, I was like, Aang is what? I couldn't think of the term.
I don't know what the term, because it's partly, it's not really their fault. I don't want to place the blame on them. I mean, this is like his flaw, but it's not inappropriate to me. I can understand him feeling left out or feeling
to a certain extent they are being insensitive. He is being extra sensitive, and they shouldn't need to kind of coddle him. Like you said, he's very needy, Antoine, but it's not like they're not.
He should also be understanding of what this is to them.
Of course, why they're being so, why they're not paying attention to him and stuff. Why they have been kind of accidentally kind of excluded him. That he should understand and appreciate why this is happening. You're absolutely right. But at the same time, he's 12, which is why I buy the flaw.
Right, he's 12. They're sharing inside jokes. They're talking about like old times that he wasn't there for. They're enjoying weird food that he hates. Like just everything about it. Even Momo didn't like it, by the way. I don't know if you noticed that. He tasted like those stewed seafoons and yeah. So
he also makes that thing about like, oh yeah, it's so comfortable laying on dead animals, like because going back to his vegan
right.
thing.
Yeah. Yeah, so absolutely, I mean, it's like I understand him feeling uncomfortable and whatnot, and that on top of the idea that like his friends might leave him, which in his head, of course they're gonna leave. Like it's their dad. Like why would they choose me over their dad? Even though they don't say, "Hey, we can't do that till after he leaves the room." But yeah, it's sort of standard stuff, but I think it's presented just well enough that I'm okay with the majority of it.
Yeah, I would say I'm okay with the majority. The most of it's just like, oh, this could have been done so much better. But there are specific points, and again, we'll get to them later on, that I think where it does kind of, I was like, that's off. But this isn't one of them.
To me, I think the main point of contention is the one that comes up after that, when the messenger hands Aang the letter from Sokka and Katara's father, and he doesn't give it to them.
Yeah, Robin, the worst earthbender messenger ever. Oh, you say you know Bato? Okay, here, have this extremely important, vital military information that could kill everyone involved. There you go. I'm off. That confused me for starters. But yeah, Aang's decision, again, idea, perfectly understand it. I wouldn't exactly choose to write it myself, but the idea of him going, oh god, yeah, let's just hide this and hold on to it and not give it to them. I get that. He's 12, he's feeling this worrying and that he's going to lose his closest family members now at this point, but the execution of it, he doesn't seem so distraught about it. Even the scene when he's explaining it and again revealing it later on, the Lyra revealed story, which has been done a million times, he never throughout this episode feels like he truly appreciates what he's doing. And I think that's something that the siblings have as well later on, after the initial reaction anyway.
Yeah, I think I agree with that. I think that for him to do something like that, or that deceptive, or just morally bankrupt, I think it would have made more sense if you could really tell that he was warring with himself before he did it, and also why it was bothering him so to the extent that it did.
Because I
think that should have been more overt.
Yeah, it's just in the presentation for me. That was all. The individual beats, I understand.
Yeah, and I also feel like they forgive him for this a little too easily.
Yeah.
I think he gets off the hook too easily.
Yeah,
that doesn't happen until later in the episode, but I do feel that way.
Yeah, there's a specific scene that we'll talk about the presentation of later when it gets to that. But yeah, this is just the first time I noticed it and think, this is. I can fully understand why people think this is Aang acting out of character. Because while I buy the idea and the principle of what was being done, I just think the presentation gave off a either average and middling quality vibe to a misstep vibe. That's how I feel.
I think I agree as a presentation thing, because I don't think it's necessarily out of character if you have like the right circumstances or believable enough circumstances to surround it. Because like the things that he does do, he could do that, but the way in which it's presented,
it's the build up and the payoff, and how we see the kind of cog turning in his head throughout each moment. To me, it's just like it's almost played off like a joke. It's like, yeah, why would I do that? You can trust me. That it's that is a deceitful and deeply unpleasant thing, and it's being played as a joke. I think there was a misstep there.
I don't agree about that being deeply displeasing or disturbing. I think that was fine, like him being feeling guilty.
I don't mean he should
in a kiddish way.
Yeah, I don't mean he should feel like horrifically evil for it, because it's a kid's problem. He's made a mistake that any kid of this type maybe would. But
and then he comes out and fesses up about it too. So I don't think it's like
but even the way we'll move on to that in a second, because the first thing that we have to talk about is the ship, because they go out into the water and do the representation of the ice dodging, right?
Mm-hmm. The rocks.
Yes. I like the fact that this mirrors and parallels with the intro of the first ever episode, because this kind of happens. Sokka kind of fails this test through the imbalance in teamwork between him and Katara and his own maturity. On the first time we ever see them, going through that ice thing that leads them to the iceberg in the first place. I like the fact that this is the kind of step into the first step along the road to manhood for him in the culture. I like that we're seeing how he's developed now. It's only three quarters of the way through the first series, but we're seeing that first step now being taken. Okay, here's what he's learned. Here's how he's grown. Here's how the team as a whole have come together. This is what they can achieve. I love the presentation of that for this specific kind of moment.
I think the ritual itself is good, like establishing like the culture of like the waterbenders, and like that there's more to like this world that binds people together than just like esoteric ways of bending. That there's like these other bonds that people have, like these sort of rites of passage. This is a well-constructed one, in my opinion.
Yeah.
Very nice.
Especially because it's something that practically they should be good at if they want to live down there and like be able to navigate like their home turf, and why they would be suited to that better than invaders, because they've dealt with it.
Absolutely. It makes sense for their culture as a whole. It makes sense for what they will need to do in their environment, and out when we're talking about this being a fleet, that's moving into the Earth Kingdom, but also how the different qualities that can be acknowledged and developed through doing it. The wisdom, the bravery, the trust, which is another thing.
That's that's a moment. Are we ready to talk about that right now, or do we have more before that?
Is there anything to cover? I think that's
That's why I asked. I wasn't sure.
I just a little bit with Zuko and Iroh finding a fortune teller. Awu.
Yeah, we're kind of going on like a little bit of a clip show, like where they're visiting some of the areas that the gang has been to recently. Yeah, so they, like Antoine mentioned, they met our favorite fortune teller, Aunt Wu, or is she a fortune teller?
Well, actually, I have some interesting points about that, guys. I think.
No.
Okay.
Okay.
But the other person was
we have
the cat
no time
lady.
to hear them. Yeah, and the crazy cat lady from Blue Spirit.
Yeah.
But yeah, so then we get to the moment where they're awarded the marks of the brave and the wise and the trusted. That does feel a little bit like, okay, this is Nickelodeon. Yeah, like we're writing a kid show now. Like, Aang, you're the most trusted trust ever.
Yeah,
like,
and you just have the position of trust. You're the one we have to trust you for your position on this ship. It's like, oh god. It was heavy-handed and unsubtle, and while perfectly fine, it's not like this is a terrible thing, but it's just because it's Avatar, it stands out. It really does.
Avatar often transcends that label if it's a kid show, and handles things much more elegantly and more sophisticatedly than this. And this is a kid. It's not bad. It's just sort of juvenile or a little trite,
And Aang's reaction, he's like, "But this is what happened. You can't trust me." But he doesn't feel like truly remorseful in this moment. He's not looking. I mean, he is. He feels bad, but I don't think that he's truly acknowledging what he's done at this point. He's not got this sorrowful. Oh God, I'm so sorry. I've just ruined this for you. And he immediately tries to say, "But you have to understand this." The
reason I disagree with you very slightly, is this moment to me is fine. I just think that there should have been a stronger resolution before they actually forgive him, because there really isn't one. This is like sort of the moment where like they clash, and like Sokka rightly accuses him of doing what he did. And it's like, okay, I'm done with you. I'm going to go see my dad. And Katara, what are you doing? You coming with me? And she's like, I'm coming with you, Sokka. Like, that's a fine moment. I just wish that when they come back and become a group together again, that Aang had more to say about what his concerns were, and like why he lied initially.
Sorry, but
just more than what we got would end up getting.
And the scene in the vacuum on Aang's side, I completely get is perfectly fine as the first step, but because we don't get anything later on, it rings false more than it otherwise would for me.
He does say something like, "Please understand, I thought blah," and then is interrupted. So like that to me could have been what you're talking about. we never really get that.
Yeah.
They just. A fight happens, and then the group is slammed back together and off. But at the same
there is a scene with the Sokka and the lone wolf thing, though. Like, there's that whole sequence that turns Sokka.
Yeah, but that's
to like
yeah,
get it. 'Cause he's like, well, yeah, I've been left before too. I don't want to leave Aang the same way I have been left. So it's like an empathetic sort of situation that's going on.
Yeah,
and
that's more an
strong.
acknowledgement of
That's a
pity
strong.
though than anything else.
I think that's a strong. I think it's a strong moment. I just think that shows Sokka's growth, but Sokka doesn't do anything wrong by his father having to go off to war. Aang made a bad move and like alienated himself from the group. I think, yes, he fights Zuko and gives Katara her necklace back, but I mean, I just think there should have been like a stronger apology scene for me to think it was really strong.
That's the big thing for me. The fact that there wasn't any acknowledgement. It made the whole twisting kind of story plot just kind of fall flat on each beat, looking backwards retrospectively. But the first time I watched it was fine. The thing I did take issue on the first watching though was that the switch that flipped. Sokka and Katara kind of immediately just go full on, like they don't seem like, why have you done this? How could you do this? It's not even that. It's just
fine with that.
It's just a case of look here and oh my god, immediate rage. There was no
I'm fine with. I buy that because they're kids, and kids fly off the handle like that.
I mean, it wasn't so much Katara and Sokka. It was more Sokka flying off like the rocker, and that's fine because that's sort of Sokka.
Only had like a few seconds of like, yeah, I'm with you, and moving off. There should have been less anger, more betrayal here for me to feel the moment. And
that's what that was to me, though. Like, what is betrayal? What is anger if not a reaction to betrayal? I suppose. But
I don't know. It's more questioning, I think, but more like a. But again, it was time. They had to. They couldn't dwell on that moment as much as they could.
I will say I can see you doing that because like you're one of the most introspective and calm people I know. But like I buy it from these folks, especially Sokka.
I do like Bato though as well. He's like, guys, Sokka, I think you should. He's trying to be the adult here as well. And like every moment like that, Bato is the strong presence I find in the scene. He's written very well in this.
I think Iroh later says about the Water Tribe that they have like a strong sense of community and love that holds them together through everything. Like I think that Bato kind of speaks to that, like his reactions to what's going on.
He's definitely a vessel for the Water Tribe culture throughout the entirety of this episode. On that level and purely the cultural side. Here's my rug, here's my ceremonial hat that Aang is disturbing. Please don't break that. There's like all throughout. But yeah, after that, the Katara and Sokka move off and they have their wolf moment. I like the idea of it. A little bit cheesy in the execution because there's a wolf cry. Oh, is it hurt? Oh no, actually it's lonely and I've felt that and you should perhaps you have felt like that. And it's like it was again very much a case of we have to write this to have them go back and have them have this revealed moment. There was no, for me, there was no appreciation of subtlety here. I don't know about you.
I feel like it was consistent with Bato because he has been kind of the rock between like everybody. So for him to be the one and bring it up, I think it's fine.
It makes sense within the context of the scene. Of course, he's going to bring it up and have that lesson because he's going to try and bring it back together. But just the wolf cry happens to happen at this exact time and happens to be this cry making, even if he's just making it up, that fits this kind of description. It just, I don't know. It felt like it was not as well delivered or thought through as everything else that we've seen thus far. Again, not bad, just it stands out to me, that's all. That's my perception of the episode as a whole, really. But it's a good enough scene by itself, in a vacuum. Katara and Sokka having, deciding they're going to go back. Just like you said, Matt, the resolution isn't really there here.
No, it's like they go back to what did happen. So Aang was out getting Appa ready. And
then one of the Abbey nuns came out, or the healer.
Because Zuko was already terrorizing the Abbey. So he cut up to Katara and Sokka first without Aang being there, right?
Yeah. So they go to the Abbey. They smash it up looking for the scent. They then track the scent further back to Katara and Sokka, find them. Aang is warned just before this happens. Goes back to the Abbey. They find them. They bring him back to the Abbey, and that's when the final clash happens.
But what was kind of weird is that first the monster, what's the thing it's called? Shivu, whatever it's called.
Shoshu. I think. Shoshu.
A Sushu. It like first had the direction of seeing or looking for the scent for Katara, but then of its own like will looked for Aang's, like without any kind of direction, like just looked for Aang's scent.
Yeah, it's like, oh
Yeah,
well, I found
that's
this scent,
Even though
so
June
let's-
never told him, hey, yeah, look for this scent now.
Yeah, it's like, I
So-
found this scent. Let's look for the next strongest scent, kind of thing, I guess. Which wouldn't be Aang's little piece of paper. It would be someone else in the presence, I guess. So.
there is an explanation for this, and it's that the writer needed to move the plot along without extending the length of the episode.
I think that's perhaps the biggest weakness of the episode, that there's the individual beats within it, while good in a vacuum, because each one of them is so clip show-esque. You know, in there's no. Whereas other episodes, they're always in one location. They're always following one specific thread. This one's kind of, this needs to happen for this scene to happen, so this needs to happen for this scene to happen. And then they're cut off before they can really dive into what they're trying to do.
It's arguably, it's debatable that there's a bit too much going on in this episode. And that group splitting could have been its own plot in and of itself without a Zuko is chasing me aspect to it. That might have helped all that breathe. But because all of that's going on at the same time, this is what you get. And it's not especially weak. It's just not as strong as it could have been, as we've been saying. As you've been saying, especially Kellen.
I think this should have been 2 episodes that should have been split. Not in a 2-parter, but just 2 episodes told independently, you know, what they're trying to do.
Yeah, we could have got rid of Great Divide and made these 2 different episodes.
Yes, yeah. Absolutely.
That could have been done. Yeah.
But
so yeah, I guess the fight ensues, which is like the standout of the episode for me.
It's like
this
the
is one of my-
first proper fight between Zuko and Aang, because the other one wasn't really. This is like the first like full on fight that they had.
Yeah,
it's
and
my-
it's
it's
such
one
a
of-
good one. It's one of the best.
It's one of my favorites of the first season because I really like the symmetry of it, and that yes, airbending is generally more passive, but Aang's not using it that way. Like he's mirroring Zuko a lot of the time, which I really like.
Yeah, it's interesting how the airbenders can, you know, through their versatility, mold the abilities they're using to match the needs of what their opponents throw in them way. He literally makes exactly the same move that Zuko does, and summons basically the airblade equivalent of the fire blast that Zuko uses.
I think a lot of that is because, like, again, they're those elements that you don't really need to draw from somewhere other to manipulate. Like the fire, you generate it when you need it in the direction you need it to, and like with air, even though you're not technically generating it, it's the same effect. So it's like you can counter like very specifically, like probably more naturally, if not more easily, but more naturally than with the other disciplines.
There's less intricate manipulations in the drawing of the element to your side. You know, with earthbending, you have to pull it from the ground, or with waterbending, you have to kind of pull it from a container and weave it into the point where you can then use it. With air, you know, obviously generally speaking, but with air and fire, it's just a case of raise arm, summon, blast, or raise arm, blast from hand, blast. You know, it's very simple in the initial ignition of what you're trying to do at any given time. But I like you said about symmetry. I like that it's not just a case of both sides doing the same thing or roughly the same.
That would
thing
be
hitting.
yeah, that'd
would
be
boring.
contrived. I mean, it would definitely look overworked or overly contrived, which is something that I have seen, and not just anime in general, but like just animation, like that has happened in a lot of fights that I've seen, where it's just blow for blow is exactly the same thing. It's like, this is not that visually interesting to me. This is done in a way where you can see the symmetry. It's overt, but not painfully so. It's artfully done.
So artfully done. And there are moments, interestingly, where they do pretty much do exactly the same thing, clashing against each other in moments of pure symmetry, with the explosion knocking them back across the courtyard. I think there's a bit on the roof as well where they mirror each other pretty much piece for piece. But they're individual split-second moments. You know, they're not the core of the fight. They're not trying to say, oh, well, let's make it symmetrical. Let's have this big philosophical discussion in this fight. You know, they don't. It's not that brazen and that upfront. The most interesting parts of it for me are on the well, when they're doing the mix between kind of straightforward fire offense with the Bagua spinning around, defending, like grab this, move here, split, do the splits here, put your leg around here, and twisting, and then the roof of the well gets blasted off, and they almost have like a foot duel on their in their stances. It's there's so much intricacy here. The animation in that particular moment as well is stellar. Like that, the movements of the legs and arms. It's just brilliantly done.
What I like about the well the most though is that you can see Zuko being annoyed with like not being able to tag Aang anyway. So then the ending of that sequence is him just completely destroying the entire well because that's the thing that Aang's using to dodge everything. So you can see like the progression of I think first he takes out just one slat of the well, and then he's like, you know what, I'm just gonna take out this whole entire thing because you're annoying me with all your jumping around on this thing.
And it's still not enough.
When you mention it that way, it's actually like a subtle and not even maybe intentional precursor to the next fight between Aang and a firebender in the Deserter.
But that was something I picked up as well during it. The fact that he is progressively taking out more and more of the environment and his frustration. You can see how Aang would think, let's address this on a larger scale. I like as well that, like you said, with the frustration of the Bagua stuff, I like that he didn't, because there's a thing that I think the viewer does as well, at least I certainly do. I tend to forget, at least at this point in the story, obviously not later, that Aang isn't just an airbender. Because when he jumps down that well, like, I don't think Zuko, and I certainly forgot about the fact that you jumping in, the water would then be the weapon, because it was like blast of a high-pressured spout of water that knocks him back. Do you guys tend to forget he's a waterbender as well at this point, or is that just me?
Not really. I remember that, but I sometimes, what I forget about is like when they're dealing with like a problem that's sort of like beneath them. It's like I forgot, oh yeah, he's not very powerful yet. Like when like the episode Imprisoned, I mentioned that. Like they could have done away with that threat with their eyes closed if they had their training that they have and Toph along with that. That plot just wouldn't have been a thing. But yeah, that's what I tend to forget. It's like, why are they, these guys are a challenge for them, really? But then I go, oh, that's right. They're really at the baby stages of their development
here. The coolest thing about the ending of that well scene, though, is that after he pushed out the fire jet and then it starts raining, or the impressions of raining, and he comes down, he has like the typical, like, I'm going to go on one knee, one hand on the ground, like superhero look up type thing. But it's still like a cool sequence because it has like a nice, like, because everything we've had before has been very kinetic, very fast. And then for the scene just to kind of quiet down with like the impression of the rain, I think was really, really well paced.
A lot of Aang's fights in general have that kind of breathing moment endings, like when he's taking kind of the breath with the volcano from the previous episode. He's like, okay, exertion.
Because he's not fighting with rage, or like unlike Zuko, who at the end of fights is usually like huffing and puffing at the end of it. Like Aang's like, okay, I'm cool. I've dealt with the situation. He doesn't even have anger. He's like, let me just decompress.
Let me just decompress my muscles because I'm tense and I've just been springing about all over the place. Let me just level myself. I like how that sets up the kind of almost poetry of the two characters and their approaches to moving into the future. This is establishing subconsciously in your back of your mind how these two operate all the time consistently, which makes all the changes and the shifts later on all the more striking. Anything else in that fight? Because there's Appa.
Well,
Appa
we didn't really. I was going to say
the Shoshi. I like how he's present in this fight.
Yeah, I mean, like eventually, but I mean, it's sort of like I like that it was a nice challenge for Appa too, because the Shoshi has like that paralyzing effect, paralysis-inducing effect. Are you happy now? With its weaponized tongue or whatever.
Thing,
and that's sort of part of, I guess that needs to be addressed, because that's sort of how they get out of this situation, is that Sokka and Katara are revived by the sisters, who, and then Sokka comes up with the plan for Katara to, it's another strong thing, I guess, is like everybody had something to do. Like Sokka devised a plan.
It's like when you have a D&D campaign and everybody has their own thing, it's perfect like that.
Sokka that came up with the plan instantly as soon as he was woken up. It's okay, we need to do this. And then Katara, in a pretty hefty display, does what she does. Because it's a pretty powerful example of it, isn't it, at this point?
Of waterbending, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I do think that she busts out like combat expertise, Katara, a little too quickly when she fights Paku, but this, like, it's nice showing gradually that she is getting more and more powerful.
I think a lot of the kids break those out pretty quickly.
Yeah,
maybe Katara in particular, because Katara, we've actually seen her going from nothing to like being master level so quickly, versus like Aang, he's been a nomad for years, Azula years, Zuko years.
Yeah, I mean, like you said, Aang's been like doing it for years. Azula's a prodigy. But I mean, yeah, I mean, I do feel like, in retrospect, I love the fight with Paku, but the one thing about it is like, wow, she's perhaps a little too badass. Like she's very precise in that fight. I definitely in a way that she isn't before.
Yeah, it does kind of come out of nowhere. We've seen moments like this, but like, as you say, there's no build up even to this level. She's not. It's all assumed. Oh, because of the scroll, because of the time that's passing between episodes, kind of thing. There's no on-screen progression with those benders at that point, which would have been cool just to see, apart from anything else, just to be able to see it, even if it didn't have caused a sort of logical inconsistency.
I love that fight. It's just like she was doing things like, hey, I didn't know you could do that, and until she did it. Anyway.
Yeah, when I said upper rectal,
or even
I meant
when they were on
the first strike, not the
on
fight
the
as a whole.
boat, but even her wave, like you do for getting the boat over the rock. Because Sokka's like, I gotta do it. And he's like, you proved yourself already. It's all good. Like she even pushes the wave up. Like it's a pretty big wave that she manifests. I mean, she does have help from Aang a little bit too, because he's putting air into the sails. But
yeah, and I've said this before. Is I'm arguably a little less impressed with grand scale, lots of element than with intricate displays.
Because what she was doing with the perfume is that she was letting whole arms or branches of the perfume come out of that big thing that went into the guy's nostrils. I forget what the shoe thing.
But
anyway,
that particular feat, you're right, Matt, is one of the more interesting examples of just pure large scale power. I mean, the movements involved, the fact that it's involving the boat and trying to solve that problem they're facing.
And that kind of stuff is more believable. Okay, so she gets more powerful. She can manipulate more water and do it with more ease, without a master. But when she's fighting Paku, she's making discs of ice and shit, all of a sudden, and shooting them like they're shurikens or something. Oh, okay. Where was that a few episodes ago? That would have been really helpful, Katara, if you could.
I suppose the only downside is that there was more water there, I guess. So she had more to work with, more to experiment quickly with. I don't know.
Yes,
but you're right.
It was closer to the full moon.
Yeah, and it's just there are explanations. They're just a bit weak. That's all, and definitely not on screen.
I mean, I feel like I'm being like Sokka now. When she finds out she can heal or whatever, he's like, wait, when can you do it? I guess I could just always do it. It's like,
okay.
Yeah, thanks for that. Thanks for helping me all these years. Not.
Yeah, we'll talk about that because that's
that would be next episode. Funny enough. But yeah, the fight. When I said about, just want to clarify. When I said
really?
about
Appa wrecking,
yeah, it's the next episode. It's the deserter.
Yeah.
No, the deserter. That's not the Katara fighting Paku. That's not.
No.
The
healing.
The healing.
The healing thing. My bad.
Yeah, but when I said Appa wrecks the Sheshu, I didn't mean the entire fight, because one of my favorite things about the fact is that is an involved fight that Appa sticks around for. It's not just one strike like he usually is. But I just meant the initial wrecking ball smack as he comes through the gate, because yeah, that was awesome. But I love the fact that the Appa's getting involved in combat here as well, because this is pretty much the first and possibly only time we see him.
Killed June, man. You got to stomp her out.
It's not the only time, but he doesn't do it very often.
It's one of the very few times that we see a full-on fight with him.
There's one of my favorite things that I'm pretty sure it's in the first part of the siege of the northern water tribe, where he picks up a random Fire Nation guy and drops him overboard, and he's got this angry grimace I'm angry Appa, and he picks him up and throws him over. That's, I feel bad for that particular firebender. That's scary. That's terrifying.
Yeah,
it's terrifying.
Yeah. But everyone has something to do,
this
and it's very
moment of comedy. This moment of comedy where Jennifer Hale, whatever her name is, gets knocked out or paralyzed by her own thing and falls on Uncle.
I didn't see you get hit by.
It's yeah. He also steals a bottle of perfume, by the way. So Iroh is a thief as well.
I told you he's sketchy in this episode.
Literally, that's right. If someone came in and watched this, they're like, "Oh, okay, so he's the sleazeball uncle."
Yeah. It's he is.
No, that's not Iroh.
He's one of the villains. He's one of the. He's no.
He's the mustache twirler. But yeah, it definitely isn't the best. You don't want your introduction to Iroh to be this episode, that's for sure.
Especially because he established that he could pay somebody's weight in gold, so he doesn't need to steal that. He hardly needs.
It just does.
And it could just be again, it's carryover, because he wasn't always a good dude. We all know him because we've seen him in this part of his life, but he wasn't always like that. You know what I mean? So you're not gonna always break all your habits.
Certainly not as good as he is now. Yeah.
I'm enlightened and wise, but I'm also a kleptomaniac.
He never actually bought that monkey before. He just stole it.
Right, exactly.
The entire market scene when he's pulling a great bargain for a reasonable price, he just stole it.
That should be
discount.
That should be the family dinner scene with the Fire Nation. Ozai's you think you're so high and mighty and great, but I know you. You're a thief. You're a fucking thief, and you suck. That should be his character flaw.
That's what.
But anyway,
Barsing said. The great sacking of Barsing said. The ultimate steal.
Right. So the episode just kind of ends after that? Like the gang gets back together.
Yeah, Aang gets the necklace and he's like, "Oh, look at Zuko told me to give this to you," and he's being all cutesy with it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think that's to me that's in my opinion the moment that should have been like a stronger like apology, and like you could tack on giving the necklace back as like
Sweet.
a bookend to the episode. But yeah, they kind of just talk as though nothing happened. Like there was no breakdown in the group. Like here we're back at on our adventure now. Like there's no like.
You didn't totally just keep information about our father from
Well,
Right.
the big thing
Yeah.
for me, I mean, they get over that way too easily given the initial like spark of their reaction. But the big thing that I think this really is missing as an episode is that Aang doesn't ever say sorry. Like
No, that's what I mean.
Yeah,
Like,
he never just says
whole
that.
thing.
That I would have had that entire scene would be him like kind of slowly appearing in front on top of the kind of the bridge of Appa's basket like saddle thing, and just been like, so I'm sorry about this, and like that would have been the moment to have it, and they just didn't, and they didn't address it throughout the entire episode. And for me, retrospectively looking back on all of the different scenes, it makes everything ring false on that level. If you know what I mean.
Especially because it's easy to compare it to like when he, not to get into this discussion, but when he does screw up with firebending, like that hangs over him, for seasons, because he hurt his friend by accident. It feels more real. It's weird to think that those two episodes are back to back.
Yeah, it's because they don't particularly blend together well, but they do have these sequences that kind of tap them. Yeah. The other thing is that Katara kisses Aang on the cheek, referencing Zuko, who is like, make sure you give him a kiss for me. I found that amusing because with the whole stuff we were talking about Zutara and Katang, the episode previous.
A little behind the scenes thing though, this Ian Wilcox guy, this is literally the only episode he's ever written for Avatar, and he never came back. So I don't know if that's a thing.
Fired. Yeah, it's like we don't like this episode. You're fired.
Maybe. I mean, the guy who did the episode Imprisoned with Haru, he never came back either, I don't think. Looking at the list, Matthew something. I may be mistaken there.
But you caught me. I wrote it. Sorry.
And that was one of the best episodes in my opinion, at least of the early series. But yeah,
that's crazy. He worked on King of the Hill too, so I wonder if, because behind the scenes stuff, Dave Filoni started on King of the Hill, and like he seemed to go on to Avatar. I wonder if he knew Ian and something happened behind the scenes like that.
Unless I'm making this up in my head, I think Mike DiMartino, one of the show's creators, also started on King of the Hill.
On King of the Hill, yeah, I think a lot of them did.
Yeah, and I know for sure Brian Konietzko worked on Invader Zim like early on as well.
Another great show. But yeah, so that's wrapped up then. Yeah, that's the episode. I hope you guys enjoyed our thoughts. Post in the comments anything you think we've missed or want to cover in greater detail, and we'll get back to it later at some point. I am Retty4, and I still don't have an outro.
I'm Great Jedi 91. Thanks for watching, guys. Take care.
I'm Antoine, and remember, be water, my friends.
Goodbye.